It's Levack and Goz on 104.5 The Team.
The 2017 NFL Draft has come and gone. Depending upon who you are, you either love or hate the Giants draft. Our buddy John Schmeelk, he covers the Giants, who are at Giants, and he also is a Knicks writer for WFAN. So, John Schmeelk here with us. What do you think? Why Evan Ingram?
Well, I think the Giants have been looking for a high-powered tight end that can kind of stretch the seam for a few years now. They really haven't had one. I mean, if you want to look for an elite tight end, since Jeremy Shockey, but it's even probably been since Kevin Boss that they had, and Martellus Bennett for a year, that they had somebody that could constantly challenge the middle of the field. And, teams last year were playing a lot of soft cover 2 defense and spreading those safeties towards the sideline to double cover Odell Beckham Jr., and you get a tight end that runs a 4-4-2 down the middle of the field, that's going to make things a lot easier to get the ball down the field and get some of that coverage off of Beckham.
John, I guess the biggest critique of that is everybody watched O.J. Howard fall. Why not move up and get Howard if you're going to go tight end anyway?
Well, I think the question you have to ask then is, did the team that picked Howard want to trade down? And from what my understanding is, the Buccaneers are basically doing backflips in their war room over the fact that O.J. Howard was standing there. So who's the next team? Do the Redskins want to trade down when Jonathan Allen, a top 10 player, is sitting there for them to pick? I don't think so. So I think you really have to, figure out if there was a team at that point that was willing to move down. Because in my opinion, guys, when you look at this draft and you had 6 offensive players at the wide receiver and quarterback positions going in the top 12 picks of the draft, it pushed down a lot of what I thought were top 7, top 8 defensive players like Malik Hooker, like Jonathan Allen, into that mid-teen area. If I was one of those teams, I would not want to trade down under any circumstance with those defensive players falling off the board.
The Ingram move happens on day 1 of the draft, day 2 and day 3 completed. Day 3 completed yesterday. Your overall thoughts on the Giants draft?
I think they filled a lot of needs, to be honest with you. The Giants, I think they were very fortunate this year when they came to pick. They're one of these teams that don't really stray that far from their board. But if there's a tiebreaker, or if there's a couple guys that are close, they will let need influence who they select. And if you take a look at every player they took, it fills a need on the roster. They wanted a receiving tight end. They got Evan Ingram. Jonathan Hankins left in free agency. They got Dalvin Tomlinson, who's basically a Hankins clone out of Alabama. They were looking for a long-term project quarterback behind Eli Manning. Davis Webb was sitting there in the 3rd round. They did not think he was going to be there, but when he was, they jumped at him. They lost Rashad Jennings this offseason. Wayne Gallman was there for them out of Clemson, who rushed for 1,000 yards for a couple years there. So, and then finally, the Adam Bisnowaty tackle out of Pittsburgh, another player. They needed offensive line help, a young guy they could develop, and he was sitting there, so they traded up for him in the 6th round. So I really think that their needs lined up with their draft board fairly well over the course of the 3As.
John Schmeelk with us right now. He's the host, reporter, producer for the Giants, covers the Knicks for WFAN, and right now is on 104.5 The Team.
Let's go back to Davis Webb. Is this more like the Ryan Nassib situation that we saw years ago, or is this someone they truly believe could be the heir apparent to Eli Manning?
That's a good question, and I think they thought at the time that Nassib could be the heir apparent. Obviously, Eli ended up staying healthy, and that didn't have to be the case, and Nassib didn't work out. He had elbow surgery this year, and right now he's not on an NFL team. I think they love Davis Webb's raw skills. I mean, they think he had the best arm in the draft. He can wing it all over the place. But he's a guy that has to learn because he's coming from that air raid system in college where you don't make any reads, and it's almost really like playing a different position than what he's going to be asked to play in the Giants, West Coast style offense. So I think it's a good thing that he'll sit there for a couple years. And if he develops to replace Eli, great. What if Eli plays another 6 or 7 years, like Tom Brady, into his 40s? Then they could trade him like the Patriots can trade a Garoppolo. So I think it gives them a lot of options. But I do believe they think he has the raw tools to be a starter in the NFL. And let me say one other thing. You guys said, what do you think of the draft in general? We're not going to know for 3 years until this draft was good. These guys that give out grades the day after the draft, nobody has a damn clue what these guys are going to be, including the guys that drafted them, by the way. Everyone's just making educated guesses here. So, grading the draft the day after, I know people do it to get clicks and everything like that, is really an impossible thing to do.
John, I've been a defender of this offensive line. A lot of people looking for Eric Flowers' head on a tray. Do you think he can make? Right, I mean, it's like people forget he's only played 2 years. Do you think he can make the necessary strides forward to be a productive right tackle this year?
Well, how about this? Eric Flowers and Bobby Hart were both younger than Garrett Bowles and Ryan Ramczyk, who were both first-round picks this year in the NFL draft. So those guys are still young. You're right, they're developing. And I think what we're seeing a trend in, guys, in the National Football League these days is the offensive line position is now a developmental position where guys are not going to come in from this spread offense in college, or they're not even a three-point stance, and be good offensive linemen right away. It's going to be a deal, even with high picks sometimes, where you're going to have to develop guys over a couple years. And I believe in my heart of hearts, and I did a lot of work on these offensive linemen this year, looking at a lot of their college tape. I don't think any of these guys were going to step in year number one and be a better left tackle than Eric Flowers. I really don't. I think they were all projects. I thought it was a weak class. I didn't like the class. So I understand why the Giants did not go offensive line early in this draft this year, because I didn't think the options were good. And frankly, the options in free agency weren't good either. You had a bunch of guys in their, low 30s or high 20s that have been around the league a few times and were frankly below average players getting $6 to $8 million a year. So I just think it was a bad offseason to find offensive linemen, and I think Eric Flowers was as good of an option as any of them.
John Schmeelk with us right now, 104.5 The Team. John, running behind that line, any chance LeGarrette Blount still joins this team?
I wouldn't rule it out. He's still a free agent. They didn't draft a traditional power back in the draft. Wayne Gallman is kind of more of a Paul Perkins style, do everything back. So it would not surprise me if they looked. And Jerry Reese was asked this the other day. He said he would not rule it out in general, adding a veteran running back in free agency. So I think it's on the table. I think they could still use a short yardage goal line back, and I think LeGarrette Blount's physical style would fit that bill.
We're both upstate New York guys, Levack and I. We both think that it'd be great to see the draft go back to New York City, but business-wise, seeing the output of support by Philadelphia, it's going to be tough to, I think, bring back the draft to New York City. Could you ever see the draft after the performance by Philadelphia coming back to NYC?
I think it would, but I think it would be in a different forum. I don't think it would go back to Radio City. I think they'd probably put it in a bigger venue somewhere. Maybe they do it in Central Park. Or they put it in Yankee Stadium, or they do something crazy like that to get, the 50, 70,000 people in attendance. I think this thing's going to move all around, though. I think these NFL teams are going to bid for this like they bid for the Super Bowl in a few years. I know Dallas wants it. I know Seattle wants it. I mean, who wouldn't want this thing after the way it's blown up the last couple of years in Chicago and Philly? So I think they're onto something, and I think it will be back in New York. But if it is, I don't think it's going to be in a small theater environment like it's been in the past.
He does it all for the Giants. He is John Schmeelk, and he helps us out, make sense of this draft. We appreciate you, man.
Hey, anytime, fellas. Happy to be there for you.
Thank you so much.